Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of overcoming it. And that's a quote from Helen Keller.
Hi, I'm Melinda Van Fleet, and welcome to the Good Karma Success Coach podcast. I'm a success coach, speaker, and business consultant, and my husband Ryan and I were laid off at the same time 10 years ago. We moved to the Florida Keys without jobs, not knowing anyone, hardly any money, and we never even been here. But we made it, and now we're living our best lives. And all along on our journey, I've said that someday when we get our quote-unquote shit together, we will help others. And since then, we've both done a lot of self-work and built successful businesses. So that day is here, and one of my ways of paying it forward is through this podcast. Each week, my intent is to be relatable and bring you tactical tips, tools, share my learnings and stories that can help inspire or transform you wherever you are in your career or general life and make an impact. I strongly believe that if I can do it, you can do it too. So what's stopping you? Welcome everyone. This week I am so excited and honored to have fellow speaker, coach, and consultant Susan McCuistion on the podcast. And I'm also going to say she is a friend of mine. Last year we were in the same speaker coaching course together. And we connected, and myself, Susan, and another speaker, Shannon, created our own little mastermind. And we've been going strong for months now. We started it last fall, maybe in like September, October, one of those time frames. And something that I just highly recommend for people to do is find like-minded people and create their own little group. And we've been extremely collaborative and helpful. And not only is Susan a speaker and a coach, but she has her own brand, Compassionate Diversity. Compassionate Diversity uses 3 interrelated concepts: comprehension, connection, and collaboration to build resilience and inclusion in organizations and in our world. I am just amazed at the synchronicity of having Susan on the Good Karma Success Coach podcast in conjunction not only with COVID, but the importance of Black Lives Matter. So just very timely, and I really hope that people listen to this podcast and have some great takeaways and learnings that they can apply in their lives and in their companies. We are going to talk today about one of the tools that Susan has in her buckets, and that is Heartmath. And Heartmath is a company that was established in 1991. And Susan is a certified practitioner of Heartmath, one of 8,000. She came back with the numbers. We kind of joke about that in the podcast that she didn't know exactly how many certified practitioners there were out there, but there's over 8,000. It's a global company. And she shares tips and tools, stories, and also towards the end, a practice. It's about 2 minutes long. So definitely listen through the practice, but you might want to circle back if you're driving or running and actually do the practice. So it's just an amazing company. The premise is, how do we connect to our hearts and others to create coherence? I just love that. So I hope you love this podcast as much as I do. Thank you so much for listening. Please, as always, share with a friend, family member, or coworker. And I would love a rating and review on Apple if you enjoy this podcast. Again, thanks for listening. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the Good Karma Success Coach podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Melinda. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am so excited. I'm like,
I know, me too.
Because I always love chatting with you. We just had an amazing chat before hitting record. And I'm just so glad that you said yes to being on the podcast. And I really appreciate what you're going to share with the audience today. I think they're really going to love it. So why don't we dive in and you explain what is Heartmath and give a little background and history.
Okay, sounds good. So Heartmath is actually an organization out of Northern California, and it was founded by Doc Children almost 30 years ago. It was in 1991. What I love about Heartmath is they are scientifically studying the connection between the heart and the brain, as well as the connection between people, how we relate to each other. And actually, third field of study they do is about the energetics of the earth as well. But I think today, most of what we're going to be focusing on is that connecting the heart the brain kind of for ourselves. And maybe we'll get a little bit into how we influence others as well. And so I just love this scientific piece. For me, my background is actually in mathematics. And, while I really love the spirituality and intuitiveness and all that, there's this other part of me that loves the science behind it as well. And so Heartmath really provides that science behind some very simple techniques that we can use to, deepen our tuition, connect more authentically with others, and actually create some really good health benefits for ourselves as well.
Oh, that's awesome. How did you end up discovering Heartmath? How did you find them?
Yeah, so this was, years ago. When I think about it, it was back in the 1990s. So it was pretty close to when they were founded. And Doc Children had put out a book that I found. It was at the time was going to a Unity Church, and it was in the Unity Church bookstore. And as I said, because of the science, I thought, well, this is fascinating. And I read the book, and so I've always kind of followed along with Heartmath. And for a long time, they actually offered certifications, but those were mostly to folks in the healthcare field and even emergency fields, police, fire departments, and things like that. So, as a coach and consultant, I couldn't get that certification a few years ago. I was, looking at them again and, kind of deciding the path that I wanted to take with my work. And I noticed they had started offering certifications, more general certifications. So I signed up for a coach's certification. This was about 3 years ago, Heartmath coach certification. And then just last year, actually did a certification for large groups. So being able to present, to teach the techniques, and to teach the science behind this to larger groups as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you found it via a book. It's like the book called to you.
Yeah, well, exactly. And doesn't it always when it's meant for us?
Yeah, that's like really cool. So you actually went out to California, right? And went to the courses?
Well, you know what? The coaching course is actually offered remotely. And I did go to California. I didn't go to Heartmath headquarters. They actually had the session that I was certified at for the larger group in San Diego. So that was nice. They kind of do it. They move that certification around to different locations. And so I actually was out in San Diego for that.
That's really amazing. How many coaches would you say are there? Because roughly, of course, because I had never heard of it until I met you and we became friends.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't even know. I could, if you want to put it in the show notes, I can get on the database.
Yeah.
Find out. Yeah.
Thinking about it.
Okay, I'll make a note. Yeah. But there actually is a database with folks around the country and around the world. One of the cool parts when I did my certification last August, my career the last about 20 years has been in the diversity inclusion field. And they separated us out at Heartmath in the class. They separated us out into these groups so that we could, learn the material and do the teach backs. And part of what I loved in my group, I was in a small group where there wasn't one person that was from the same country. So there were 7 or 8 of us in that group, and every single one of us was from a different country. And so Heartmath really is a global phenomenon. And quite frankly, with the things that we're going through right now, as this is being recorded, we're kind of right in the middle of this COVID-19 and the pandemic. This is what Heartmath was made for. This is, how do we, connect to our hearts? How do we, connect with others and create what they call, coherence within ourselves and within the field. One of the things that always comes up in Heartmath is, what are you feeding the field in terms of your energy?
Wow, that's amazing. Now, when you had your webinar, I think it was last week, weeks are going by so fast. One of the examples you showed, and I know you showed it via a grid, but maybe you can kind of explain the gist, was really demonstrating the aspect of Heartmath and how, we all have these experiences with, our energy and things that upset us. So can you maybe talk about that example? That was the husband and wife in a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Make
So
it
this is
reasonable.
part, yeah, part of the science that they do. So one of the things that they were looking at is how do we um, expend our energy? Because really, this is about um, intelligent management of our energy within our body. So before I go there, I just want to get to this definition of resilience because that really underpins everything here. And so the way that Heartmath talks about resilience, so let me even step back from that. If I say resilience, what do you think of for resilience, Melinda?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about the capacity to keep pushing forward. So whether it's letting something roll off my back and not get upset about it, I would say that's just pretty good example there, that I'm able to keep going.
Yeah, yeah. What I love is what you said is the capacity, because typically people kind of think about resilience as this ability to bounce back,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And the way that Heartmath defines resilience is in terms of capacity. It's the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. So
Mm.
what's different about this capacity idea, when we say capacity is how much of something we have, and there's also this implication that we can build up our capacity over time or drain our capacity, right? And so that's capacity part is a really important capacity is a really important concept within this. And so when we get back to the husband and wife, so what they were looking at, they had a man hooked up with a heart monitor. So one of those Holter monitors that you wear for 24 hours. I don't know if anybody has experience with that, but it monitors your heart. And he was told to journal what was happening at different times throughout the day. And so the two of them, he and his wife, were driving in a car, and they had not an accident, I'm sorry. They started an argument. They had an argument start. And what you see on his heart rates is the argument starts, and guess what happens? Boom, right? It pops up. So his heart rate's going along, like 65, 70, pretty normal. They hit this argument, bam, it's up, well over 100, 120, right in there. While they're arguing, you see the heart, his heart kind of sustaining there. The argument lasts about 15 minutes. The heart stays elevated even after the argument ended. It starts to come down about 10 minutes after the argument ended, and then it stays elevated for well over an hour. So by elevated, remember before the argument, he was about 60, 70, pretty normal. Elevated, he was around like 90 average in terms of his heart rate. So that's a pretty significant jump, and something that went on long after the argument ended, right? So when you think about what we're doing to our bodies, these times of stress, our emotions are the key drivers of our physiology. So any emotion that we have, there are over 1,400 chemical and hormonal changes that happen in our bodies. And so we've all heard of cortisol, right? The stress hormone.
Right.
And so imagine hours after this argument even ends, he's still got this cortisol coursing through his body. And it's the stress hormone, and the cortisol breaks down our systems, and that's how stress deteriorates us over time.
Yeah. I just love that example. And it makes you think. I'm sitting here right now, just thinking of something that happened about an hour ago.
Mm-hmm.
Share the story because it's just a simple example that I hope everyone starts going, oh my gosh, I have these things too, right? So I was boiling shrimp for our salad for lunch, and Ryan was in the main room where the shrimp was boiling, and he's working on his fishing stuff, and I'm in the back office. I ended up being on the phone with a client, so I lost track of time. I hang up the phone. I could smell the shrimp, which means it's getting overcooked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I run out. I'm like, oh my God, damn it. Like the fish, the shrimp. And Ryan's like in La La Land.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, didn't you smell it? I'm just like, didn't you smell it? So I guess that's where resiliency comes, is that, yes, my cortisone probably went through the roof because I'm thinking that I just ruined shrimp, which is, pricey and was our lunch. I fix the shrimp situation, I go in the back, and I guess I probably came back down pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
then what I don't know, I moved on from thinking about it till obviously just now sharing the story, but you wonder what's still going inside your body and how resilient was I then to like bring it all back down, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really fascinating. I love this example.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up some great points in your example too. Again, if we go back to that definition, it includes recover from, right? And
Mhm.
so one of the things when we learn these heart math techniques and we practice them regularly, it helps us recover from those situations more easily. The other thing that you brought up, it's our brains don't know whether something is happening right now or whether it happened in the past. So as we revisit, these arguments, what happens? Well, the same thing that happened the first time, right? It's
Yes.
these emotions are coming through and triggering and coursing again, the chemicals through our body. And so we're actually, our bodies actually relive these situations. They don't, again, brain doesn't know if it's really happening or not. We can think of lots of situations, whether they're, happy situations or situations like you gave, right? We actually feel that stuff. And when we're feeling that stuff, our bodies are having the same reaction as the first time that they happened. And so that's why it's so important to build up this capacity for resilience. Stuff's going to come up. It's life, right?
Right. It's gonna burn
That's
once
okay.
in a while.
Right? But when we build up, our capacity for resilience, we're more self-aware. We're recognizing when these things come up, and we start to say, okay, wait a minute here, right? And maybe do technique, or we're able to recover from that more quickly. And that's the important part.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And we could go down a gazillion different
Oh gosh, yeah.
rabbit holes on this because I'm so with you. I feel that one of the most unspoken truths out there is how you replay scenarios over and over in your mind, right? And
Mhm.
no one talks about that. And I think that that is one of the keys to my marriage with Ryan is that I I don't do that. I rarely do that. I've been I'm going to use your word, resilient in my life, and I've gotten better at that I don't replay, but my husband
Mhm.
replays, and he's gotten better at not replaying, but I can always see when he's replaying, and I can
Mhm.
hear it when he's replaying. And so I try to like knock it out as his like coach. So I'm like, all right, why are you still going over this scenario that happened 3 days ago? And,
Right.
most people don't talk about that and they don't address it. They don't recognize it in themselves or in other people. And, it definitely all kind of goes into your bucket of what you're talking about is being
Yeah.
able to move through those situations and get your energy back in line.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it's important to remember the brain's primary job, one of its primary jobs, is to protect us, right?
Mhm.
The fight or flight kind of thing, right? That's one of the most primal instincts that we have. And so what happens is we come up against an incident, and our brain goes through like this, okay, where did this happen before? How am I going to, mitigate any, any issues that come up, or any response, or, whatever. And so it does all this comparison. We come on, new situation. Our brain does all this comparison to past events. And then, we kind of decide a course of action. And the thing is, this all happens right within a split second, and we don't realize it. And when we start running it over, like, we've all had those situations, they just keep turning in our head, and they turn in our head, and they turn in our head. And it is important to learn to let go of it. And that's one of the heart math, all the heart math techniques start with focus on your heart, right? Because what that does is that pulls the attention away from that spinning stuff going on in your brain. When we can pull our focus to our heart and focus on our heart, it helps to calm down that little spinning wheel going on in the head.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love this. Thank you so much for sharing. I really hope that people listening really think and go, oh my gosh, I get what she's saying and I do that. Or I get what she's saying and my husband or wife does that. And really just work on the solution piece of it.
Yeah.
So how would you recommend, do you want to walk through like an exercise, a tool on, how to maybe start to practice?
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite tools kind of integrates two of the tools, so I can kind of give you two in one. But before we do, I want to, because this tool also focuses on another concept. If I could cover that
Yeah,
first, and
please.
that way it's a little bit more complete as we move forward. So as I mentioned, this really does focus. We really want to start thinking about our emotions, right? And so emotions in and of themselves aren't good or bad, right? They just are. It's what we do with them as a result of what we're feeling. They're just information systems, and so Heartmath focuses on what they call depleting emotions, right? So as we were talking about capacity, right? And I said we can deplete the capacity. There's these depleting emotions. Any guess what those depleting emotions might be, Melinda?
What? Just anger? Well, if it's depleting, your compassion would go away. Your passion would deplete if you were getting angry. It's like the opposite, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of those anger, frustration. It might be some of those high level ones, or even sometimes if we're just kind of feeling sad, right? Just because it's low level doesn't necessarily mean it's depleting, right? Think of a like a battery in your car, right? There's those high energy things that kill the battery, or you could just leave your lights on in the car overnight, right? And that will slowly deplete the battery too. So, those emotions, depleting emotions, things like, anger, fear, frustration, even just sadness, right? Those are the things that drain our capacity. On the other side are the renewing emotions. So again, high level or low level, doesn't matter, right? We might, be really excited and happy about something, or we might just be feeling gratitude or appreciation, where we just have that sense of our hearts filling up, right, with love or appreciation. So those are the renewing emotions. And so we distinguish between those two in Heartmath, because this technique that I'm going to teach you talks about these renewing emotions or regenerative feelings. And it's important that we have an idea of what these regenerative feelings are for us, or a situation or scenario that we can imagine. So I usually suggest, like, if you've got a pet, right, maybe think about your pet, because I know my cats, man, there's times I look at them and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love you so much, right? There's just this full sense of love. On the other hand, if I think of my husband, there's times I might feel, oh my gosh, I love you so much. And there's the other times where I feel like, oh my gosh, I just want to, So usually, like, using a person as a go-to is not the best thing for a regenerative feeling. So, maybe it's that, or maybe it's like a favorite vacation spot. Maybe you've got a beach you like to go to, or a mountaintop, or a lake, right? But what I want everybody to do right now is kind of think about, what is that scenario that is going to help you create that regenerative feeling? Because that's what we're going for. We're going for creating that regenerative feeling. Again, doesn't need to be like, yay, appreciation, gratitude, love, right? That's where we're heading to this. If it gets you to yay, more power to you. But that's so that regenerative feeling is important. So the technique I'm going to teach you is called the quick coherence technique. And there are 2 steps to it. I'll explain the 2 steps first, and then we'll go ahead and go through it. So the first step is actually heart-focused breathing. So I mentioned I was giving you a 2-in-1. If all you want to do is do the heart-focused breathing, that's good enough. So the heart-focused breathing, as I mentioned, you bring your attention to your heart or chest area, and you slow down your breathing, and you imagine that your breath is flowing into and out of that heart or chest area. And then that is just called heart-focused breathing. That alone is good. If we're going to do quick coherence, we're going to start with the heart-focused breathing, and then we are going to move into making a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, okay, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. So those are the 2 steps. It's really simple. This isn't something that you just want to just jump in and okay, I'm going to do it today right now. But it is something we really want to practice if we want to change overall, because we can overall change how we feel and approach things overall with practice. So just a couple minutes a day, 2 or 3 minutes a day, 2 or 3 times a day is enough to start to build up that capacity for resilience. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. And it's going to be, we'll do about 2 minutes. I think that's probably long enough on a podcast. People may jump in at the quiet part and go, wait, she's not talking. So we'll go ahead and do 2 minutes. And what I would like everybody to do is to focus your attention in the area of your heart. And imagine your breath is flowing into and out of your heart or chest area. And breathe a little slower and deeper than usual. Maybe 5 seconds in or 5 seconds out, whatever's comfortable for you. And now make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. Okay, and that's it. That's 2 minutes.
Wow. Can you imagine if everyone practiced this like every day, like you're saying, 2 to 3 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day, the changes that you'd see in people and behaviors, like it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's definitely our goal.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for leading us through the exercise. And hopefully, like if someone's driving, you could probably still breathe and get the intention and the idea. I close my eyes. So obviously if you're driving or running, you don't want to close your eyes.
Well, right, and that's the goal with Heartmath is you can do these anywhere.
Yeah.
When you're starting your practice, it might be easier if you're used to meditating and things like that. It might be easier for you to help focus to close your eyes. But eventually, the more that you practice, the more you can do this right in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I can be sitting face to face and talking, and I can be sitting there doing Heartmath, quick coherence technique or some other technique. We can be in a meeting room, or we could be, speaking in front of a group of people, or even just, walking one day when we can again, walk through the mall, right? Or down the beach. We can be doing it anytime, because this isn't the same as relaxation, right? I think some techniques really look at relaxation. Heartmath is really looking at, how do we make this an active part of our day? How do we actively practice and continue to build that capacity? Because, if we're in each other's presence, if I'm doing this, I'm going to affect you. And that is part of the science. That's part of what they've looked at, because the energy fields of our hearts, they go out about 3 feet from our body, right? They have measured this. So they go about 3 feet away from our body, and they're 100 times stronger than the energy field of the brain. The energy field of the brain only goes out about an inch from the body.
Wow.
So when we're sitting together, if you're, is you're, maybe sitting at, dinner with Ryan or whatever, if you start doing this, there's no way you can't affect him, right? There's
Yeah.
no way, because that's what you're feeding the field are those regenerative feelings, right? And that will now connect in with him as well.
So you might not know this, but how do they measure something like that? How do they measure that it goes 3 feet from your heart?
Yeah, so there's they've measured things with EKGs, ECGs. There's other scientific I forget, magnetometers or what. I will allow myself to be corrected on that, but I don't magnetometers, things like that they can measure the electrical field of the body, and they've used that in terms of hooking things up. Heartmath actually even has their own technology that they have developed where you can, as you're practicing, measure your own coherence, and that's pretty amazing too, because I know for me, when I start, when I'm hooked up, I've got 2 of the personal devices. When I'm hooked up and I see my heart rate just really jagged and jumping and going all over, and I start doing this, I see that heart rate smooth out. I see the amplitude of the curve becoming larger, right? Higher and lower and more smooth, and it's pretty cool to watch. They've got their own tech that for folks to use as well as they go through this.
Oh my gosh. So when you used to do speaking and do workshops, would you bring along your equipment like that?
Yep. Yep.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yep. Absolutely. It is pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any last thoughts or advice? I think too, you have a mantra to share.
Well, yeah, I think it's more of an affirmation. One of the things that I like, as one of the things we've been talking about too, not in the podcast, but before, was, where we focus our attention. And again, that, focus the attention on the heart is important. But one of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm feeling stressed, is just to affirm that I'm surrounded by loving and supportive friends and family. And I have found that to be more true now than ever. And just so much wonderful support from friends and family and help. And usually it's kind of, I'll run that through my mind a couple times, and next thing I know, I'm getting a text from somebody maybe I haven't heard about in a while. Right? So that's just one of my favorite affirmations. I'm surrounded by loving and supportive family and friends.
That's beautiful. I'm surrounded by loving, supportive family and friends. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So how can everyone follow you, connect with you? Give us the scoop.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So just my name. All of it is just my name. If you want to connect with me, anybody can feel free to shoot me an email. It's just Susan at day1llc.com, but I'm going to spell that day one a little bit differently. There's another meaning and purpose behind that. Day one is spelled DAIONELLC.com.
And you can't leave us hanging. Like, what's the meaning and purpose?
Oh, okay. So actually,
you can't do that. Like, what?
One like that. Yeah. Well, there is meaning behind that. Actually, the meaning behind that, I am a registered member of the United Tribe of Indians of Wisconsin, the Oneida Nation. That's on my mother's side. And DAIONE is actually an anagram of Oneida.
Oh, wow. I gotta Google that.
You spelled it out, right?
Yeah, I did. I wrote it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm just like putting it into my brain. So yeah, that's really cool. Wow. Yeah. Very fascinating. And that's topics for a whole other podcast. So yep. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I really hope that everyone learned something and got some value and can easily implement Heartmath into their life. It's very cool.
Thank you, Melinda.